What if there were errors in your Bible? What if intentional changes were made? Would you want to know the truth? Would you want the Bible to be corrected from corruption? Let's talk about changes that were made to the Genesis genealogy and timeline. Specifically, the ages at which each generation of birthright begat the next generation. Let's take a look at the King James Biblical genealogy timeline of Genesis. Here we see the begat age, the years lived, and the birth and death years from Adam. Now let's take a look juxtaposed to the older version from the writings of Josephus, the chronicler. Josephus lived around the time of Christ and was an ancient history recorder. His writings are available in a modern book now. When they are juxtaposed, you can see that 600 years has been removed from the year length of the timeline. The begat year of age has been reduced by 100 years on each of 6 of the birthright generations of Genesis. The older Septuagint version of Genesis also matches the writings of Josephus on this timeline. Now we can also add in the BC year date on each, if we have the beginning year. I believe the beginning year of Adam's creation or birth is hidden in the name of God, the Tetragrammaton of Yahweh. I believe the year date is plainly hidden in the numbers of the Tetragrammaton name. Let me show you what I mean. Here is a picture of the Tetragrammaton name in Paleosemitic. The Tetragrammaton is read from right to left, but the numeric values are normally read from left to right. Here is a key of the first 10 letters of the pictograph alphabet as a reference. These are the Paleosemitic pictographs and their values, 1 through 10. There are 2 year dates that are easily seen in the numbers of the Tetragrammaton. They are 5650 BC, and 10,565 BC, one left to right, the other right to left. Here is the Tetragrammaton name twice, with both values given, and their purpose. As you can see, they are referred to as Adam's birth year and the beginning year of the age of Leo. If we use the year 5650 BC as the beginning year in a fully corrected timeline, it appears to fit perfectly with chronological and historically recorded history. Let's take a look at the fully corrected timeline with the BC year date added with the timeline. The BC year dates appear on the far right, beginning with 5650 BC. As you see, the longer timeline fits better with the beginning year given in the Tetragrammaton. Now let's take a look at the remaining genealogy timeline of Genesis. First, let's look at the timeline in the King James Version Bible. This is the patriarch genealogy list after the flood, from Shem to Joseph. As you see, Canaan has been omitted from the genealogy timeline. Now let's take a look juxtaposed to the older Septuagint version of Genesis. Here you see that Canaan was originally in the timeline, as the 13th generation. As you see, almost 900 years has been removed from the second half of the Genesis genealogy. this including the years removed with the entire generation of Canaan. I believe there are some other minor scribing errors in the Septuagint version also. But they are minor, and I do not want to go into the particulars of their becoming. With much research, I have been able to remove all of these minor errors also. Now let's take a look at the fully corrected timeline, with the BC years added in also. There is one more minor error that I am investigating in the years lived of one patriarch, but this will make no difference in the BC year dates. As you see, this places the year of the Great Flood, or Deluge, as the year 3394 BC. This year date fits much better with what we know about ancient recorded history and archaeology. The corrected Genesis timeline then ends with the birth of Joseph, in the year 2021 BC. This year date of 2021 BC, is very near to the beginning year of the age of Aries. This also being the same as the end of the age of Taurus, this being the age that began with Enoch. I believe these timeline changes were made to hide the fact that Jesus was, and is, the Messiah. This because the Pharisees did notice that Jesus did come, at the right time. 5,650 years from the birth of Adam. Just like the Tetragrammaton had always illustrated. By shortening the timeline they could then argue that 5,650 years had not yet passed since Adam's creation. With this, they could then argue that Jesus was not the Messiah, and that they had not killed Messiah, but an impostor. So it came that another timeline was created and then eventually, the Jewish Masoretic text was born. This then becoming the text that was used to make most all Bibles in the world. I would like to mention here also that the number 5,650 is exactly 113 jubilees. A jubilee is 50 years. Exactly 113, 50-year periods. Now that the timeline and genealogy has been properly re-established in the Genesis book, let me now explain and show you how it is that I know that it is correct. First, let's talk about the first 10 patriarchs and their timeline, before the flood. This first part of the timeline is easy to explain. It matches the Septuagint and Josephus, which also match each other. I made no corrections to the existing Septuagint and Josephus timeline. Only that I added in a column for the BC year dates also. I know that 5,650 BC is the correct beginning year, because it is in the Tetragrammaton. And also because it matches very well to what we know about historically recorded history and archaeology. I also think the BC year date for the birth of Enoch matches very closely to the beginning of the age of Taurus. More precisely, I think that the age of Taurus begins when Enoch is 300 years old. This making him the last patriarch to have children, during the age of Gemini. The house of Enoch then being the last to be completed, during the age of Gemini. This also being that the first 7 houses of the first 7 patriarchs, are all completed during the age of Gemini. The age of Taurus then beginning in the year 4228 BC, this I think to be a perfect date. This because it also fits very well with the end of the Genesis genealogy and timeline. Enoch is then the Ra, or chief of the Taurus age, the pictograph letter R having the numeric value of 300 also. Now let me show you how I know that I have the second part of the genealogy and timeline correct, after the flood. The second part, after the flood, was a little more challenging to unravel and correct, and it is a little harder to explain how I know that I have it properly corrected. First, let me explain that the BC year dates are based on the birth ages and the begat ages of the patriarchs. Any change in the birth ages or begat ages of the patriarchs results in a change of the BC year dates also. So if the birth ages and the begat ages of the patriarchs are correct, then so are the BC year dates. Vice versa, if the BC year dates are correct, then so are the birth ages and begat ages of the patriarchs. Now, let me show you significant clues that the BC year dates are correct, after the flood. The first and the most obvious clue is the proposed year of the flood. This beginning 2 years before the birth of Arphaxad. This being the year 3394 BC, this year also fits well with the supposed beginning date of recorded history. The next significant clue in the BC year dates are in the last 4 dates for the last 4 patriarchs, after the flood. This being Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. The 21st, 22nd, 23rd and 24th. Let's take another look at the corrected genealogy timeline, after the flood. As you see, there is a custom from Arphaxad to Nahor, of having begat their sons round their 130th year. Now let's take a closer look at the BC year dates of the last 4 patriarchs. Here are the BC year dates for the last 4 patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Abraham is the 21st generation, 14th from Enoch and 7th from Moloch and his brother Salah. The birth year of Abraham is 2272 BC, both of the numbers 22 and 72 are used significantly in religions. These two numbers are also significant in creation mathematics and other esoteric mathematics. 22 represents the completion of a perfect circle. 22 divided by 7 equals 3.1428 or perfect pi. This is different than conventional pi, which is 3.14159. I will explain why this is not perfect pi. The difference is that a perfect circle has 364 degrees, like the days of a year in the Enoch calendar. A conventional circle only has 360 degrees, missing the extra 4 quadrant degrees between the 90-degree angles. The number 72 is used significantly in multiple religions. It is also the number of years per degree of the Mazzaroth circle. The Mazzaroth circle is the ecliptic constellations and stars that encircle the Earth. They are divided into 364 degrees. The birth year of Isaac is 2172 BC, 100 years after Abraham. 21 is divisible by 7 and is Abraham's generation. Isaac then represents the 22nd generation and has 72 in his birth year. The birth year of Jacob is 2112 BC, the same as his brother Esau. Jacob then having the 21 in his year of birth also, and the number 12 to represent his 12 sons. The birth year of Joseph is 2021 BC, the last of the 24 patriarchs. This year of birth has 3 different meanings. The first is the obvious 21 in his birth year. If the age of Taurus began in 4228 BC and was 2220 years long, This would make Joseph 13 years old at the end of the Taurus age. This making the numbers nicely calibrated from beginning to end. This would mean that Rachel, who was barren for so long, conceived her first child in 2022 BC. I also believe that Abraham was Terah's first child, and that he was born when Terah was 70 years old. Now let me show you how I know that I have the ages lived, or death ages correct of each of the patriarchs. As I mentioned before, I was still investigating the death age, or years lived of one patriarch. More specifically the death age or years lived of Peleg. I do not believe that it is the same as Rez his son 339 years. I use all timelines available, including apocryphy timelines, as research and study tools. But my most valuable study and research tool is the voice of God Himself, and my personal experiences with the Trinity of God. With these research and study tools, I have discovered the real age of death for Peleg, and how it is that I know I have the death ages correct. Here is the corrected timeline with the correct death age of Peleg inserted. 354 years old. Now here is the completed timeline and genealogy with all corrections made, including the BC year dates. Now, to find the calibration and symmetry that God has placed within the timeline, to verify its validity, we must add together all of the years lived, or death ages, of all 24 Genesis patriarchs. If you add up all of the years lived for the first 10 patriarchs before the flood, it totals 8,575 years. If you add up all of the years lived of the remaining 24 patriarchs after the flood, it totals 4,529 years. 8,575 years for the first 10 and 4,529 years for the remaining 14 patriarchs. The grand total of the combined years lived of all 24 patriarchs is 13,104 years. 13,104 years is exactly half of the total years of the precession of the equinoxes for all 12 constellation ages. The formula for the precession of the equinoxes is 364 ecliptic degrees multiplied by 72 years for each degree. It's 364 degrees times 72 years. This equals 26,208 years to complete all ages. 26,208 years divided by 2 equals 13,104 years, half of the ages. I believe this verifies the ages lived of each patriarch to be correct, and perfectly calibrates the Genesis genealogy and timeline. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Check out the book series, The 24 Elders and a Little Scroll. Here is the link. Thanks again.